Hello everyone, my name is John, I'm the Geeky Fanboy, and welcome back to my channel. And today we're doing another book review. We're talking about another popular YA book. Today we are talking about Leigh Bardugo's Six of Crows. Now, I know this is quite a popular book. In fact, I actually did buy this years ago. I think I bought this like 6 years ago or so, but I haven't come around to reading it up until now. I did actually try to start reading this a couple of years ago, then DNF'd it, and now I'm coming back to it. So yeah, here we go, because I'm in a fantasy mood, and I've heard many good things about this book. A lot of people really like this one, including my girlfriend. They're all like 5 out of 5, great fantasy novel. And I mean, like I said, I bought this years ago because I was like, the cover is absolutely gorgeous. It has like my favorite color combination. And the synopsis sounded great, you know, 6 interesting characters going on a high-stakes heist. Yes, I'm all up for that. But now, here we are, and I'm assuming we've all read the title of the video. So, what happened? Why was I disappointed with Six of Crows? Obviously, there are going to be spoilers since I have a number of things to discuss. So, in case you still want to read the novel, read it, come back later. The video will still be here. Okay, so to maybe preface this, like I said, I bought this book 6 years ago because I thought it sounded interesting. I really liked the idea of 6 characters in a fantasy world, going on a high-stakes heist in a prison. I thought that sounded really cool as a premise. I love heists in general, like who doesn't love a good heist? But then all like set in like this fantasy setting. When I bought the book, I had not heard of Six of Crows, I had not heard of the Grisha trilogy, I had heard nothing of Leigh Bardugo, no idea what any of that was. So it really just came from a general interest I had for the book. I have watched the TV show Shadow and Bone because I know that the Six of Crows, the characters and parts of the storyline are in that show. I have watched that show. Thought it was okay, not great, but I enjoyed the show. The Six of Crows storylines were definitely my favorite parts of that show. So I also, maybe that also like finally gave me a good reason to read this book, because I like the characters in the shows. I was like, yeah, cool, let's finally get into it. I'm like on a fantasy spree at the moment anyway. Like most of the books like 3 or 4 plus books I've read were fantasy, so I decided to finally give this a go. Also, since this is considered to be like a really good fantasy novel, I was like, cool. After the disappointment that was Fourth Wing, which was also supposed to be really good fantasy, this had to be actually good, I thought. And while this obviously was not the dumpster fire that Fourth Wing was, I was still disappointed, unfortunately, by Six of Crows. Now, I'm not here to like completely trash this novel. I'm also not here telling you this is like a 1 out of 5 absolute garbage novel. It's not. It's really not. I gave this on Storygraph. I gave this novel a 2.75 on Goodreads, because Goodreads rating system makes it so hard. On Goodreads, I ended up giving it a 2, because 3 stars on Goodreads means I liked it, but I wouldn't go as far with Six of Crows. I didn't think it was garbage, but I also didn't like it very much. So I'm sort of like in the middle, leaning towards a more negative opinion that has me going, this isn't great, this isn't bad, but it's just very meh, like run of the middle, meh, average storytelling. And now I'm here to tell you why that is the case. But of course, before we go into the negative things, we should start with some good things. Because yes, there were things in this novel that I liked. First off, the plot idea in general. The premise is really great. Like I said, 6 interesting characters going on a heist in a fantasy world in a prison, that is such a good setup. Like, it really gets you interested in what's about to happen, and was the initial reason why I picked up this book in the first place. The writing style in general, I think, is also perfectly fine, perfectly serviceable. It's very readable. I think you can get through this book like in a day or on a weekend if you're like on a reading sprint. It reads like very nicely. The story flows like as it is written mostly well, I think, going by style. There are like different POVs in the book. Almost every character of the Six of Crows has a POV chapter. I will come back to how those POVs are written later, because there's some bit more negative stuff that I would mention. But in general, I thought the way it was written was okay. It was readable. There was never a line where I was like, oh my god, what the hell was that? That never happened. So it was enjoyable enough for me to like keep reading. And also another big plus, basically the biggest plus, the characters. The characters are definitely the centerpiece of this novel. You can tell that a lot of detail has been put into most of the Six of Crows. Obviously there's some that stand out a bit more. That's something I will come back to later. But in general, you can tell that this story is really about the characters, how they're interacting with one another, what their background stories are. And you can tell that Leigh Bardugo put a lot of thought into these characters. Also in the representation, because we don't only have like straight white kids in this. You know, there's like a bunch of different characters representing all kinds of backgrounds, which I really enjoy, which I like, because we don't always see that, I think, too much in fantasy, and it's nice to see like varied representation in a YA fantasy book. And if it came down to like naming favorite characters, just like maybe to put this out there, my favorites were probably Nina and Inej, because they were like two really cool like feminist badass girls that I really enjoyed, who represented two different sides of femininity, I think, because Inej is like more this sort of quiet, stealthing, assassin kind of guy, girl, but more like spiritual, and Nina is much more confident with like her femininity. She's very outgoing. She's like, you know, a bit flirty if she has to be. And I like both these girls the most. I think. Something else that I thought was good in regards to the story, the plot as it happened, was I really enjoyed the last quarter of the book, because pacing is an issue in this novel that I will come back to. But the last quarter of the book, I think, is really interesting and really well paced. Like, this is all the last quarter of the book, which is like maybe the last 100 pages, maybe. Flows really nicely. It's like really this fast-paced, thrilling heist. A lot of stuff is going on. There's like, you know, social stealth, people getting shot. There's some final surprises and reveals. Every character gets like sort of their own moment. That was really nice. I liked seeing that. And to sort of like finish this, what I liked about this book section, in general, this is not one of those really boring, basic ass, annoying YA books that I hate so much that I often see praised on the internet, if we're being honest. That was not that. Like I said, most of my problems I have with this book are just like really specifically related to this book, and not like to the YA fantasy genre in general. So there's like no like really cringy, annoying characters. There's like no weird expressions that were used where I was thinking, who the hell would say that? There was like no there is romance in this book, but it isn't like, I'm like, why are these characters in love, or they're just horny for each other? That is not love. That nothing like that is in that book, and I appreciated that so much. Okay, but now we are unfortunately already jumping into the bad stuff that I didn't like about this book, that's dragged this book down for me. We're starting off with some general things. First off, and that's quite a big thing. To me, this book didn't really feel like fantasy. I know this is a spin-off book based on the Grisha trilogy, which is like a YA, can you say high fantasy? If like big fantasy series of books. But I knew that the Grisha weren't necessarily like the focus of this book, because the Six of Crows is more of a spin-off. But you know, I'm still kind of expecting, okay, this is set in this high fantasy, like really detailed, thought out world. But there's nothing really all too fantastical in this novel. Like, sure, we get the Grisha, who are like these people with special abilities, but they're not really that big of a thing in this novel. Sure, we get Nina, who's like a heart render, so she can like control and stop your heart, that kind of stuff. And we get Jasper, who's later also revealed to be a Grisha, who's basically like, I forget what these names are for the Grisha, but Jasper is basically like a Magneto. He's like a Magneto Jr. That's what Jasper is. And that's sort of it. Like, Nina stops some hearts, Jasper shoots well, but also like uses his powers once or twice. The rest is just like normal stealthing, normal punching, normal prison setting. That's it. Like, this felt more like it was set in like a steampunk kind of setting with like one or two fantastical elements. Like, given that this is supposed to be a fantasy novel and it is based on a high fantasy series with like a world that has already existed from the Grisha trilogy and is like a fantasy-esque place, there's like not enough fantasy in this fantasy novel. Definitely not. Like, the story is about a heist that goes into a prison where they're supposed to find a guy who made a drug that makes the Grisha like ultra powerful, but in a bad way. That's it. Like, there's nothing really. It's about drugs, it's about breaking into a prison, and that's it. There's like nothing fantastical about this. It's not even really about like the Grisha who this drug would affect. That's not a focus. It's just really a gang of characters going into a prison, and this honestly could have just been like a normal steampunk novel, and you just take out like the hard rendering bit, and that's kind of it. I was just expecting more there. I don't know if that's down to me. I just knew that this is based on a high fantasy series, and that this is a YA fantasy book. So, I don't know, maybe I was expecting too much fantasy in this fantasy novel. I don't know, someone tell me. But that's sort of what it felt like. And speaking of the Grisha trilogy, which is another general thing, is that, yes, like, you don't have to have read the original Grisha series to understand this book, since this is a spin-off and it doesn't use, as far as I know, it doesn't use like any of the main characters from the Grisha series. But it constantly sort of like felt, while reading, like I was missing out on something. Like, I was missing context, because the narration or the narrative voice to me always sounded like it assumed that I knew certain things about how the world works, and I just didn't, because I haven't read the books, and I haven't watched, the last time I watched this TV show was like last year, so it just constantly felt like stuff wasn't explained to me enough, especially stuff that was about the Grisha. Like, I do not remember what any of these like different Grisha types are called, or what they can actually do if you like gave me the title of whatever it is. I sort of understood that like the setting of the Grisha world is like very European based, as was very clear like with Katadam, that this area was supposed to like be based on the Netherlands. I know that there's like Ravka, you know, sort of like Russian inspired, and Shuhan, which is supposed to be, is it just Asian, or is it like a particular Asian country it's inspired by? I'm not quite sure. Like, I got sort of that idea, but again, there wasn't really like done anything with that, or I wasn't told enough. Also, which is also a thought I had while watching the TV show, I kind of thought that the whole European-based thing is I'm not quite sure if lazy is the right word, but maybe you understand what I mean. I was just like, okay, but are we gonna do anything with that? Is it just like literally based on different countries and stereotypes, or okay? Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it was also down to me. I don't know. To me, it just felt like while I was reading that the narration was constantly assuming that I knew certain things that I just didn't. Okay, let's get into some more details. The biggest issue for me was definitely the pacing. This is a slow book for a novel that is about a high-stakes, thrilling heist. The book takes a really long time to get to that heist. The book is, I think, roughly 500 pages long. And I didn't get to the heist until over 300 pages in. Like, they get to the prison at around page 300. Before that, everything else is set up and background stories. Feel free to judge me, but you know, when I read the synopsis on the back of the book and it told me that this was going to be about a thrilling heist, I expected the largest part of the book to be about a freaking heist, and not just the last 200 pages. That just really bothered me, because the whole time while I was reading, I was like, are we getting to it? When's the heist comes? Are we getting to the prison? What is going on? When we're finally getting to the freaking heist that they've been talking about for 300 pages? Like, that really bothered the hell out of me, because I was just like, sort of like having this itch the whole time. I was like, can we like finally get to it, please? I just want to read the story that the book is apparently about. Because the story is constantly, you could say, interrupted. And there are several flashbacks of the characters where they tell us their background story. There's like a chunk of pages in this book where we like spend time on a ship for like 100 pages hearing about background stories while nothing is really happening on that ship. I was like, oh my god, are we finally done? Are we done? Like, there's too much time spent setting up this story and the characters and not enough time spent actual heisting. It just didn't line up well. The first chapter also doesn't help with that pacing feeling, because the first chapter of this book is easily the worst one. The first chapter is told from a completely random character's point of view. We're never gonna see this guy again. And it's just like almost 20 pages, just this guy going about his day, talking about his mustache, talking about how he can talk to the girl he likes. And then like at the final three pages, we finally get to the setup that is, he observes how Grisha takes the drug and it makes them go crazy. And that's it. That's like the first chapter. And it's so boring, and it doesn't convince you at all of wanting to continue this, because it does not give you a good impression of what the novel itself is gonna be. I know that it's supposed to be... Why is this not a prologue? Because this is supposed to be like a prologue. This reads like a prologue, but it is given, you know, a POV character name, and is like a full chapter length, instead of just being a short prologue that sets up this idea of this drug exists, which is what a prologue would actually be good for in that case. It's not part of the actual story, but it sort of sets up a really important element that will be important in the main story. Why is the first chapter not doing that? Like, the first chapter is the reason that when I tried to read this the first time a couple of years ago, I DNF'd it, because I was like, this story is just... we're not getting to it. Like, what is this? Just not that good. The pacing is constantly slowed down and interrupted by flashbacks. There are many flashbacks in this book, belonging to like basically all or almost all of the Six of Crows, and they constantly interrupted the flow of the story or really interesting scenes. And I understand that they needed to be there to like sort of get some more background detail to the characters, but at times I got really annoyed with these with these flashbacks. after a while, because they interrupted the flow, and I was like, can we finally get to the fucking prison? Like, we got flashbacks as late as them almost being at the prison, which is like more than halfway through the novel. Like, they arrive at the island or the place, wherever, where the prison is. They're on their way to the prison. I was like, okay, cool. Now the heist is finally about to, like, finally start, because they're almost there. And then another 20 pages long flashback. And I was like, are you freaking joking me right now? Like, at times, the flashback just, like, really interrupted moments or flows of scenes. Where I was like, why are we suddenly jumping to this? Because at times it also was not clear that the narration was, like, transitioning into a flashback. Like, sometimes the narration, like, was very fluently, like, going into a flashback from a previous scene. And sometimes it took me a moment. I was like, hang on, why are they suddenly talking about something completely unrelated? There's other people. Oh, it's a flashback. Like that. Sometimes it took me a while. And I didn't, like, some flashbacks were incorporated okay, because, you know, they started off, like, with the next chapter or something, or there was, like, a clear line made in the narration where was sort of made clear that, you know, this is now something Inej is thinking about, for example, of the past. But sometimes there were moments where, like, it just slowly transitioned. We were in the middle of a scene and suddenly, like, transitions into, like, the characters thinking about something from their past, and you were like, hang on, we're suddenly somewhere else now. And it felt a bit off. And it just really bothered me, because sometimes they went on for way too long. And I also felt like they weren't always as detailed for certain characters. I will come back to that, because some characters in this book are more detailed than others, like Inej and Kaz. And I would argue Nina, they get, like, the most sort of, like, flashback details that really, like, go on for 10 or 15 pages. But then, like, there are characters like Jasper and Wylan who, like, barely get anything. Yeah. Speaking of characters, let's talk about the characters. I just mentioned, like, some of these characters, while all of them, I think, have their pros and cons, and in general, I think the characters are the strongest, like, good thing about, like, the best thing about this book are the characters. That's the sentence I wanted to say. But you could tell that some of these characters receive more attention or more detailed narration than others. Like, I already mentioned them. Jasper and Wylan definitely get the short end of the stick here. Especially Wylan. This boy is so insignificant. He's the only character who does not get a POV chapter. Literally every other character gets a POV chapter in this book. Not Wylan. That's how insignificant he is. He's so insignificant you forget, half the time you will forget that he's even there. He's just, like, hanging out. He explodes stuff, like, once or twice maybe in the entire book. And makes flirty eyes at Jasper occasionally. That's it. He's not really relevant to what is happening. And the book thinks he's so forgettable he doesn't even get a POV chapter. Like, what the hell? Jasper is another one, is another character that I thought had much more potential than he was given credit for, because he is interesting, but he's more of a, to me it felt more like Jasper was supposed to be, he felt more like a comedic relief character. He was there to make the jokes, to, like, be flirty with Wylan, do, like, one or two cool shooting scenes, and that was kind of it. I didn't think he got as much attention as the other main characters did. He was just sort of there to lighten the mood a little and to be funny. Which is a shame, because I thought he was an interesting character, but the narration didn't really give me more to him. So at the end I was just like, yeah, okay, he's the funny guy who shoots guns. So that's sort of it. Matthias is, To me, Matthias is maybe a hit or miss character. You like him or you don't like him, I think, because there's some interesting stuff about him, and definitely out of all the characters, he has like the best character development, because he goes from being absolutely prejudiced against Grisha and hating them to like falling back in love with Nina. So they have sort of the main love story in this book. To me, he was okay. He felt a bit like a Scandinavian German stereotype at times, because he was like really grumpy and prejudiced. But yeah, at least that man gets some development. Like I said, I liked Nina. She was one of my favorite characters. She has like this love story going on with Matthias. Why they break up, why they sort of broke up in the first place, like why she betrayed him, I thought was kind of stupid. But I thought it was okay, like how they fall back in love. You could at least really tell like what the feelings there were, how it happened. And I thought Nina gets like one or two really cool moments, and you can really tell she's like a capable spy, and she gets like some cool like social stealth scenes, but also like some action with her hard rendering, which I thought was interesting. So that's fine. Inej was another one of my favorite characters. I know also a bit of a stereotype, but I like this sort of like shy social outcast assassin type of character. I'm a big fan of that. And then there is, of course, Kaz Bracker, who I think is BookTube, Bookstagram, BookTok's famous, most popular book boyfriend. Like, every review I've seen of this book was like, Kaz is the best, everyone loves Kaz, everyone wants to marry that boy who's underage, I will remind you. I think he's like 17 years old, so... And I'm here to tell you, I can't share that love for Kaz Bracker. Let me tell you why. Kaz is an asshole. He is such a bastard, and not in a good way. Yeah, like, I get it. He's like this cool, slick, shy, no-nonsense, ice-cold, witty bastard who doesn't care about anyone, or at least that's what he pretends. He doesn't care about anyone. He's always in control of the situation. He would sacrifice anyone to like fulfill his plan, but secretly has like a heart of gold, because, you know, he's in love with Inej, but he's trouble communicating those feelings and all that. I kind of get it. I get why people find him appealing. The thing is, he still behaves like an absolute twat throughout this entire novel. He behaves in such a disrespectful and awful way towards his crew and his supposed friends, because that's what they are, even though he pretends that's not the case. That I was like, you are awful. Why would anyone work for this guy? Like, there's a moment, for example, there's a moment in this book where he like knowingly jeopardizes the whole mission because of a personal vendetta he doesn't tell anyone about. He just goes out of his way to go do that and jeopardizes the whole mission. He like sort of like subtly insults so many people, never shows any kind of gratitude. And never, it just wasn't clear to me why anyone would work for this guy, why anyone would find him likable, why anyone would find him charismatic. Yeah, sure, he's smart, but that's kind of it. And the thing is, yes, a lot of people were like, but he has like a heart of gold, and he has like feelings for Inej, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, that doesn't matter. Kaz is only thinking those things, but he's never acting on them. Almost never. Not in any way that's relevant. Like, yeah, sure, he's thinking, oh, I like Inej, or he's thinking, yeah, you're useful, you're useful, I like you, I need you in my crew. Yeah, sure, he's thinking that, but he's never saying anything about it. He's never showing it really to the others. And if he does, they don't really know that. Like, for example, sure, he spends time with Inej after she got shot. She doesn't know that. She's unconscious for that whole time, and he sits by her side. Yeah, cool, nice. That's like about the only nice thing he does. Like, even when he's confronted directly towards the end of the novel by Inej, who is like, I get that you have a difficult time talking about your feelings, but this right now is the moment where you need to tell me, like right now. And he still doesn't. I get that there's a sequel, and I get that that's sort of the point of Kaz's character, but it doesn't help that he behaves like this throughout the whole entire novel and is always perceived as an asshole. It just didn't sit right with me that he always was so disrespectful towards everyone around him, that he never showed any growth, that sure, he was thinking nice things, but he was never really acting upon those nice feelings that he was having for things or the people around him. And that's why I can't share people's love for Kaz Brekker. Let's talk about another issue that I had with the characters. The age. All of these characters are between 16 and 18 years old. The oldest one is Matthias, who is 18 years old. Kaz Brekker is a criminal mastermind at the age of 17. Inej is like the world's greatest assassin, age 16. Nina is a 007 James Bond spy and former soldier, also at the age of 17. Like, what even is that? Like, I understand that under some circumstances, children have to grow up quickly. They just have to mature faster under really certain special circumstances. I understand that it happens in the real world and also in this novel. But all of our 6 main characters, literally all of them, none of them behave or talk in any way whatsoever that a teenager or older teenager would. None of them. They all talk and behave like they are at least 25 years old. Like, in the show, they did that so well because they cast people who are older. Because that makes just so much more sense. Like, Kaz, in my head, while you read this book, I was like, this man has to be at least 30 years old while I picture what he's doing. Because it doesn't make sense otherwise. Like, for example, Inej. Inej was sold into prostitution when she was young. And she escapes prostitution, or gets out of that, around the age of like 14, I think. In the book, she's like around 16, 17. That means in that 1.5 year time gap, she became the greatest assassin ever to be seen. That has earned herself like a really big reputation. In that span of not even 2 years, a 16-year-old girl became the greatest assassin. Yeah, sure, that makes sense. Kaz was another one where I was like, this can't be serious. Like, his background story is that he lost his brother when he was like, I don't remember the exact age, let's say around age 9 or 10. In the book, he's 17 years old. That means Kaz became a criminal mastermind who is feared and known by hard-boiled, hardcore criminals in Catadam in the span of the ages from 10 to 17. So all of these hard-boiled, hardcore criminals are or were scared of a man who was and is mostly a child and teenager. That's who they were scared of. They are scared of a 17-year-old boy. What? That does not make sense whatsoever. I don't care how witty Kaz is, how smart he is, that he can really like whack people with his cane. I don't care. Apropos cane, wasn't it convenient how his cane and his disability just like sort of appeared for most of the book once the heisting was on the way, just saying. But yeah, that's the ages of these characters make no sense. Matthias is also one of those characters who like really talks and behaves like he's a man in like his mid to late 30s, who behaves like he's this really like strong established soldier. Nina was a soldier and is now like a spy for the government as a teenager. Like, what the hell? the ages do not make sense. Again, I would get it that if that was the case for like some of the characters, like 1 or 2 maybe, that they had a really tough time and had to grow up when they were really young. But for all 6 of our main characters, that makes no sense whatsoever. And lastly, I'm coming back to something I mentioned earlier. I mentioned that the writing in this is divided between POVs. So every 6 of Crow, except Wyland for some reason, gets a POV chapter. And my problem was that, while I do like this idea, to me, the voices of these POVs didn't feel unique enough. They never feel like it were like the characters talking. Like the vocabulary always felt way too similar. Everyone sort of talked in the same way. There was never really anything like expressions or choice of words where I was like, okay, that's specifically like not Wyland because it doesn't get the POV. That's specifically Jasper talking. That's specifically Cass talking. Like that, it didn't feel like there was enough variety, like in the writing style there. So I like the idea there that, you know, you have this group of characters and they all have like their own view on these things, but I wish the narration had like sort of delved a bit deeper into that idea. Okay, that's it. That's all I had to talk about in regards to 6 of Crows. I know this is not a popular opinion. I know this is a very beloved book in the book community, especially online. So please don't crucify me. Again, I didn't think this was horrible, but I also didn't think it was good. I don't know if I would read the sequel anytime soon. I know this book ends with like sort of a cliffhanger, and I know the sequel is also supposed to be good. But given what I've seen in this novel, I just feel like there's so much potential to these characters, but the author is like really wasting it and not telling the story that the book promises it's going to tell. I might read the sequel in the future out of like sheer curiosity, but for now I'm done with 6 of Crows. I would love to know what all of you are thinking. I did a community poll before shooting this review where most of you actually said that you liked this book, and for some of you it was like a 5 out of 5 best book ever read. No one said that they flat out hated it. Some people said it was sort of meh, but no one said that they outright hated it. So yeah, I'm sort of interested to see what all of you are thinking. Was this a book you love? Was this a book you disliked? Neutral? Any thoughts? Please do tell me down in the comments below. I also posted a written review of this book on my Goodreads and also on Storygraph. I write reviews for most of the books I read on Goodreads and also on Storygraph, if I remember. So do feel free to like check those out. Follow me on there to get some book reviews and keep updated on what I'm reading. For now, that's it. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't done that already. And I'll see all of you very soon. Goodbye.